My name is Drew Collins. I am 18 years old, and 3 weeks before I was supposed to start college, I found out my parents stole $187,000 from me. My grandmother saved that money over 18 years, every single month, so I could have a future. My parents drained it all to buy my brother a house, and when I asked why, my mother looked me straight in the eyes and said because he is the one who actually matters in this family. I did not scream. I did not beg. I picked up the phone and called my grandmother. What she did next made the evening news. I grew up in Ridgemont, a small town of 12,000 people, where everyone waves from their porch and nobody locks the front door. Our house sat on Oak Street, a brown ranch-style home with a patchy lawn and a basketball hoop my brother Tyler stopped using years ago. There were 4 of us: Mom, Dad, my older brother Tyler, and me. On paper, we were a normal family, but in practice, there was a ranking system. Tyler was the son, and I was just background noise. He dropped out of college his sophomore year, and my mom threw him a dinner, called it a fresh start celebration. He quit 3 jobs in 2 years, and Mom called each boss ungrateful. He moved back home at 24, and Mom redecorated his old room to make him comfortable. Meanwhile, I made the honor roll every semester. I joined the debate team and worked part-time at the coffee shop on Birch Avenue starting at 15. I bought my own textbooks and my own clothes, never asking for gas money. Every time I brought something home, a trophy, a grade report, or an acceptance letter, Mom would glance up from whatever she was doing and say, "That is nice, Drew." I remember one evening specifically during my junior year when I walked in with a report card of straight A's again. Mom was on the phone with Tyler and just waved me off without looking, pointing at the kitchen counter. I set the report card down, and it was still there 3 days later, unopened. Dad sat at the end of the table most nights, quiet with his eyes on his plate. He never said I did not matter, but he just never said I did. The only person who ever made me feel like I counted was my grandmother, Grandma Ruth. She told me when I was 10 years old that this money was mine, and she was saving it for my future. I never doubted that, not once. I had no idea that my mother had started draining the account the previous November. My brother Tyler is 26, tall, with an easy smile, the kind of guy who walks into a room and everyone likes him. He got the charm from Mom, but he never got the follow-through. Every single time I succeeded at something, Mom had an explanation for that too, saying girls have it easier or that I was just book smart, which was not the same as real-world smart, like Tyler. The true betrayal began long before the bank account reached 0. Last Thanksgiving, I had just been accepted to 3 top-tier universities, and I spent the entire afternoon waiting for my mother to bring it up at dinner. She never did. Instead, she stood at the head of the table, raised her glass, and announced that Tyler was going to do something incredible, and that she believed in him with her whole heart. The entire table clapped. Uncle Jim, Aunt Patty, everyone, and not a single person mentioned my acceptances. Dad sat at the far end of the table, staring at his mashed potatoes as if they held the answers to why I was invisible. After dinner, my phone rang. It was Grandma Ruth. Her voice was careful and deliberate. "Drew, I need you to keep everything I have ever sent you. Every envelope," she said. I did not understand why then, but I promised I would. Fast forward to a Tuesday in July, just 3 weeks before move-in day. I was sitting at the kitchen counter with my laptop open, finalizing my enrollment checklist. I had paid the housing deposit from my own coffee shop savings and selected my meal plan. All that was left was to transfer the tuition from my college fund. I called the bank to confirm the wire instructions, a routine call I had rehearsed in my head for months. The woman on the line asked for my social security number, date of birth, and account verification. I gave her everything. Then there was silence. Not a pause, but a heavy silence, where you can hear someone choosing their words very carefully. "Ms. Collins, I am showing a current balance on this account of $214.36, she finally said. I actually laughed because I thought there was obviously a mistake. I asked her to check again, explaining that the account should have approximately $187,000. More silence followed, along with the sound of a keyboard clicking. "Ma'am, I am looking at the transaction history," she replied. "There have been multiple withdrawals over the past 8 months, ranging from $9,000 to $15,000 per transaction. The withdrawals were authorized by the custodian on the account, a Mr. Roy Collins, my father. I did not say anything. The kitchen was so quiet I could hear the refrigerator humming. Through the window, I saw Tyler's new truck in the driveway, the one he got last month. The one Mom said was a good deal from a friend. My hands were not shaking. Everything was just still, like the world had pressed pause and forgot to press play. $214 left out of $187,000. They had been taking it for 8 months. I set the phone down gently, stood up from the counter, and went to find my mother. She was in the living room, feet up on the ottoman, watching a renovation show with a glass of iced tea. "Mom, where is my college fund?" I asked. She did not flinch or even look surprised. She just muted the TV and said we used it for your brother's house because he needed it more than you do. The room tilted, but something inside me shifted into a cold, hard focus. I told her that was my money, saved by Grandma Ruth specifically for me. But Mom just smiled that patient, condescending smile she used on children who do not understand how the world works. She told me she was the mother and she decided what was best for the family. When I mentioned the legal nature of the custodial account, she stood up and walked toward me, close enough that I could smell her perfume. "You want to talk legal? Fine, sue me," she said. "But remember who raised you and kept a roof over your head?" Then she delivered the sentence I will carry for the rest of my life. Tyler needed a stable foundation, and he is the one who actually matters in this family. She said it like it was a basic fact, like the sky is blue, before unmuting the TV and sitting back down. I went to my room and sat on the edge of my bed, my breathing even as I ran the math. My tuition deposit of $5,000 was due in 10 days. If I missed it, I would lose my spot and my scholarship. 4 years of honor roll, debate trophies, and SAT prep at the library because I could not afford a tutor. All of it was about to vanish. I had $812 in my checking account from 4 months of coffee shop tips. It would not even cover the deposit, let alone a semester. I thought about student loans, but I would need a co-signer, and I knew my parents would never agree. I could have gone back to that living room and begged, but I already knew she would just tell me to figure it out like I always do. They took everything because they counted on my resilience as permission to rob me. I went to the garage to find my father. His workbench was covered in wire strippings and electrical tape as he rewired a junction box for a client. He did not look up when I walked in, but his shoulders tightened because he knew why I was there. "Did you sign the withdrawal forms?" I asked. He set down the wire cutters and stared at the wall for a long, terrible silence before he finally nodded. When I asked why, he said your mother said it was the right thing for the family. He turned toward me, his eyes red at the edges from not sleeping. "Tyler is your brother, we are all family, and the money will just come back around," he claimed. I repeated the figure back to him, $187,000, and asked how that just comes back around. He looked away, repeating that my mother thought it was best. I left the garage, walking past the kitchen counter where my report card had sat unopened for 3 days, and past the living room where the renovation show was still playing. I went to my room, picked up the phone, and called the person at the top of my favorites list, Grandma Ruth. She picked up on the second ring, her voice warm like sun through a kitchen window. I told her everything, the bank call, the 8 months of withdrawals, my father's signatures, and my mother's face when she told me I did not matter. When I finished, there was a 10-second silence. Then her voice came back. But it was not warm anymore. It was sharp and controlled like a blade wrapped in velvet. She told me to listen carefully, that the money was mine and mine alone, and that she had every document from the day she opened that account. Grandma Ruth told me she had kept copies of every document for 18 years, almost as if she had always known this day might come. The next morning, as I was pulling on my shoes to leave, my mother appeared in the hallway, hair done and arms crossed. When I told her I was going to Grandma's house, her face changed from anger to something colder, recognition. She accused me of tearing the family apart and started the practice routine of crying on cue, claiming Grandma never understood her and always judged her. I watched the quivering lip and the hand pressed to her chest, a performance I had seen 100 times when she needed to play the victim. I told her I wasn't destroying the family. She did that when she stole from me. And I stepped past her as she reached for her phone to call Tyler for damage control. Grandma Ruth's house was a small white cottage that always smelled of coffee and lavender. She was waiting at the kitchen table with 3 blue folders organized with color-coded tabs. She slid the first one across, the original account opening document, naming me as the beneficiary and my father as the custodian from the month I was born. The second folder held every annual statement for 18 years, and the third was the most recent balance of $214. She told me she had requested these from the bank every single January because, while she loved her daughter, she had never trusted Diane with money. I asked if she knew this would happen, and she said she hoped it wouldn't, but she prepared for the possibility anyway. That afternoon, a high-stakes estate attorney named Margaret Bowen arrived at the cottage. She was 60 years old with gray hair pinned back and a handshake like a vice. She spent 20 minutes in total silence, methodically going through every page of the blue folders. When she finally took off her glasses, she looked me in the eye and explained that this was a clear violation of fiduciary duty. Withdrawing $187,000 to buy a house for another family member was not managing the funds for my benefit. Given the amount, she told us this constituted felony theft of custodial funds under state statute. The word felony hung in the air like smoke. Grandma Ruth asked what my options were, and Margaret laid out 2 paths: a civil lawsuit for restitution and a criminal complaint filed with the district attorney. Grandma didn't tell me what to do. She just nodded and waited for me to decide. I said both. Margaret wrote it down and promised to file the complaint the next morning. As she left, Grandma Ruth didn't rest. She picked up her phone and started scrolling through her contacts with a focused intensity. When I asked what she was doing, she said she was calling Karen Avery, a reporter for Channel 7 who used to be her student. She told me my mother was already controlling the story, telling people it was just a misunderstanding, and that she relied on our silence to operate. Grandma wasn't going to let her steal my future in silence. By that evening, my mother was in full damage control mode. My phone buzzed 11 times between 6 and 9 p.m., with texts from her claiming this was a family matter and that I was destroying everything. She even posted in the Ridgemont Community Facebook group, asking for prayers and claiming Grandma was tearing the family apart over a financial misunderstanding. She already had over 60 reactions by midnight, hearts and prayer hands from people who only knew her side of the story. Tyler called me at 8:30, sounding frantic, saying Mom wanted him to come over and smooth things over. I asked him if he knew where the money for his house actually came from, and there was a long silence before he admitted Mom told him she took out a home equity line. I told him there was no loan, only my stolen future, and I hung up. 2 days later was my high school graduation party. I didn't want to go, but Grandma Ruth told me to show up, smile, and be gracious, hinting that it was part of a larger design. The party was at our house on Oak Street, and Mom had gone all out with streamers and a catered spread. 30 people filled the living room, family, neighbors, and teachers. Mom glided through the room with a perfect locked-in smile, touching shoulders and refilling glasses. At one point, she put her arm around me for a photo, calling me her independent little fighter. I smiled for the camera, but the whole time I was counting faces, knowing that not one person in that room knew the truth yet. The mask slipped halfway through the party when Great Aunt Bonnie asked where I was headed for college. Before I could even open my mouth, Mom materialized out of nowhere with her hand squeezing my shoulder. She told everyone I was still figuring things out and that kids change their minds every week. When Aunt Bonnie mentioned the fund Grandma Ruth had set up, Mom didn't miss a beat. She announced to the entire room that the fund was really a family investment, and they had redirected it where it was needed most because Tyler just bought his first home. She actually beamed with pride while telling 30 people she had stolen my tuition. I saw my AP English teacher, Mrs. Patterson, watching Mom with narrowed eyes, her jaw tight. Mom just kept going, saying I had grit and didn't need the money anyway. After the party, Tyler caught me on the back porch looking terrible, his eyes bloodshot. He asked if the fund was legally only mine, and I showed him the UTMA document on my phone. His face drained of color as he read it. No mention of him, no mention of the family, just my name as the beneficiary. He swore he didn't know and said Mom had shown him fake paperwork for a credit line. I believed him, but I told him I just wanted what was mine. We sat there in the dark, 2 siblings on opposite sides of a theft neither of us planned. I knew then that my mother hadn't just robbed me. She had built a paper trail of lies to deceive her own son. Monday morning began with a scream from the kitchen that sounded raw, furious, and animalistic. My mother had found the envelope from Margaret Bowen's law office in the mailbox. Within 30 seconds, she was banging on my bedroom door, hysterical, demanding to know how I could press charges against my own parents. I opened the door, and she stood there holding the formal demand for restitution and the notice of the criminal complaint. I stayed calm. I didn't raise my voice. I simply told her that she had stolen $187,000 from a custodial account, which was a felony. She tried to pivot to her usual script, the wounded martyr, the mother who only wanted to help. But when I wouldn't budge, her tears evaporated as if someone had turned off a faucet. She hardened instantly, looking at me with cold, flat eyes. "If you go through with this," she said, her voice completely devoid of emotion, "you will never be part of this family again." I looked her straight in the eye and told her I already wasn't. She turned and slammed her bedroom door so hard that the framed family photos on the wall rattled. She didn't know yet that the final nail in her coffin had already been ordered. Wednesday morning, Karen Avery, the Channel 7 reporter, arrived at Grandma Ruth's house with a full camera crew. Grandma sat at her kitchen table, blue folders laid out, and told the story exactly as it happened, without a single scrap of embellishment. She detailed 18 years of saving $500 to $800 a month from her teacher's salary and pension. She showed the opening paperwork, the annual statements, and the final balance of $214. She looked directly into the camera and said, "My daughter and her husband withdrew every penny to purchase a house for their son, not for Drew." When Karen asked if she was really filing criminal charges against her own child, Grandma Ruth didn't hesitate. She said she loved her daughter, but she loved justice more. The segment was scheduled to air on Thursday at 6 p.m., and Karen told us it would change everything. Thursday evening, the town of Ridgemont watched as the truth was broadcast into 12,000 living rooms. The report was devastating. By 8 p.m., the local community Facebook group was absolute chaos. Hundreds of comments were flooding the feed. Neighbors were tagging each other, and my AP English teacher, Mrs. Patterson, wrote publicly that I had earned every opportunity and deserved far better than this. Parents who had their own custodial accounts started panicking, calling their banks to make sure their children's money was still there. Mom tried to call the station to have the report pulled, but it was already too late. The story was picked up by state-level news, and for the first time, my mother's carefully curated image of the perfect family was shattering in real time. By Friday morning, my mother's counterattack was live on her personal Facebook page. A long, carefully worded post. She claimed the news report told only one side of the story, and that she was a loving mother who had sacrificed everything. She called our family differences heartbreaking and asked for privacy, compassion, and prayers. It got over 100 reactions in the first hour, but the comments section quickly turned into a battleground. People who had known Ruth Hartwell for 30 years pointed out that she didn't lie, and others started questioning why I hadn't been informed if it were truly a family decision. The prayer hands and stay strong messages slowed to a crawl. My Uncle Jim even deleted his comment, and the community slowly began to distance itself. The pressure on my parents was compounding. My mother was removed from the Women's Auxiliary Board, and the church prayer chain coordinator suggested she step back from leadership for a season. Even neighbors who had waved at us for years started checking their mailboxes with their backs turned. Then I received a private message from one of my mother's old college roommates, who told me Mom had borrowed $3,000 from her years ago and never paid it back. I realized then that my mother's entire narrative wasn't just being dismantled by me. It was collapsing under the weight of her own history of deceit. The following Wednesday, Margaret Bowen called with the update I had been waiting for. The district attorney's office had formally opened an investigation and subpoenaed the bank records. When I asked what that meant, Margaret explained that they were reviewing every single signature and authorization to see the pattern of withdrawals that had been calculated just below reporting thresholds to avoid automatic alerts. She told me the case was textbook, and that she would be very surprised if charges weren't filed. I hung up the phone and sat on the porch, looking at the hydrangeas and the wind chime, finally realizing the scale of the fallout. My family was officially a legal case study in felony theft. Tyler was the next person to pivot. He called me on a Friday afternoon, his voice sounding older and tired. He told me he had talked to his own lawyer and was giving the house back. He couldn't sleep staring at the ceiling of a house that had been paid for by his little sister's stolen future. He planned to list the house for sale and have all proceeds go directly into a restitution account managed by Margaret Bowen. He admitted that Mom had lied to him too, showing him fabricated documents for a home equity line of credit that didn't exist. He didn't ask for my forgiveness. He just did the right thing, and for the first time, my brother and I were on the same page, even if we were still miles apart. The consequences arrived not all at once, but like snow piling on a roof until the structure finally gave way. 2 weeks later, the district attorney made it official. Diane and Roy Collins were formally charged with felony theft of custodial funds. My mother's defense attorney tried to argue that it was a family misunderstanding, but the evidence was undeniable. Tyler's revelation about the fabricated home equity paperwork turned a bad decision into clear premeditation. When the bank records showed how they had structured the withdrawals just below reporting thresholds, the jury didn't need much deliberation. Roy pleaded to misdemeanor theft in exchange for cooperation, but my mother refused to admit fault until the very end. She eventually accepted a plea to a Class 4 felony, 5 years of probation, restitution, and community service. The house on Oak Street sold in 6 weeks, and every cent went directly into the restitution fund. My parents were forced to move, and their reputation in Ridgemont was permanently tarnished. People stopped waving, the church leadership removed them from their posts, and even their longtime friends slowly faded away. But for me, the victory felt different than I expected. I didn't want them in court. I wanted them to be the parents I deserved. Sitting in the courtroom, watching them sign away their rights and their past, I realized justice doesn't feel like a celebration. It feels like grief with a receipt. They never apologized, not once. Even with the evidence laid out before the judge, they maintained their innocence, and that silence was the final stinging proof that they weren't the parents I had built my life around. Grandma Ruth, however, was already building my future. During those final months, she met with Margaret Bowen to establish an irrevocable trust with the very last of her savings. She handed over a cashier's check for $42,000, her entire safety net. To ensure I had a foundation, I cried like a child in the lawyer's office that day. But she just held my hand and told me I was worth every penny. With that trust, the GoFundMe started by my AP English teacher, and a full tuition scholarship I earned based on merit, I finally started college in the fall, fully funded and entirely on my own terms. I am in a dorm room now, looking out over the quad where the leaves have turned gold. On my wall, there is one photo of me and Grandma Ruth on graduation day. I haven't closed the door on my parents forever. A letter arrived last November, still refusing to admit they were wrong, but the key is in my hand now. Setting a boundary is not burning a bridge. It is building a door that only opens from your side. I am studying for my exams. I talk to my grandmother every Sunday, and for the first time in 18 years, the future I am looking at belongs to no one but me. If you are sitting in your room wondering if standing up for yourself is worth the fight, please hear me. You are worth every penny of your own peace.